response. Being recorded? Okay, good. So it is now 5:03 p.m. So I am going to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. Today is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. Participating in this evening's meeting in person here in the auditorium, I have Mr. Bayes and Mr. Wright. And participating via Zoom, I have Mr. Anderson, Mr. Boynton, and Mr. Bushka. I do believe Lorraine said she was on vacation this week, so good. All right, then we'll jump right in. Item number 1 on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to open the meeting to the public.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. A motion made by Mr. Bayes, seconded by Mr. Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're open to the public, and I don't see anybody from the public here in the auditorium. So we're going to move right into item 2, entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the regular meeting held on July 20th, 2021.
So moved.
Anderson.
Right, seconded by Mr. Anderson. Questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain, Mr. Bushka.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bushka. So record, this motion passes with 1 abstention, Mr. Bushka. Item number 3, I'll entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 143-220, repurposing the $700,000 appropriation and bond authorization previously approved by the voters on November 6th of 2018 from the window replacement project at the middle school to roof improvements at the Torrington Public Schools.
So moved. Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson,
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Wright. Questions on the motion?
So this is what roof improvements at Torrington Public Schools. They're not going to specify yet whether they're middle school roof improvements, BOGO, or.
So, excuse me. So what happened is the middle school roof repairs, the flat portion of the roof was repaired last summer. Last summer, we bonded $700,000 to do the roof work. The state construction reimbursement covered all but $200,000. So we have currently in our bonded projects fund $500,000 to complete the roof work at the middle school. From what I understand, you'll recall the Board of Education presented their capital request for $1.5 million. That was in fact the gross amount of the cost of the project. The net cost should be somewhere between $325,000 or $350,000. So the $500,000 we are currently sitting on in bonded projects should be sufficient to get the middle school roof done. Last night, the city council appointed a committee, a building committee, so that they can move forward with design specs and grant applications and get the middle school roof completed. This reappropriation or repurposing, we've been calling it, of $700,000 for the window work will allow us to move the Vogel-Wetmore roof forward. You'll recall that was budgeted in their capital plan for the year, fiscal year 2023. Again, a project that should qualify for 75% reimbursement. They had budgeted $1,344,000. So we're looking at, again, costs somewhere around $300,000 to $340,000. What we will do with this second round of bonding, if the voters approve the repurposing, we'll hold off actually bonding the project until it is completed and we know what the reimbursement is, and bond only those costs that are the taxpayers' portion.
So at the end of, with this transfer or repurposing of appropriation, that'll allow the Vogel Wetmore School project to go forward until reimbursement.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. So both the middle school roof and the Vogel Wetmore School roof can be done within the next 12 months.
And without seeking, well, there may be a little bit of leftover
Surplus.
to seek. Well, no, so are we still gonna seek bonding in a referendum in November?
No, so this will be it. We're hoping that through this question will appear on the ballot, just as it appeared in the resolution that was attached to your agendas. And it will simply ask the voters to agree to repurpose the 700,000. There will not be a request for the 3 million is during the entire budget process. We kept saying 1.5 for the middle school and another 1.3 for the Vogel Wetmore. In fact, as I said, those were gross amounts upon further discussion and dialogue with the superintendent and the former business manager, Ed Aram. We came to the conclusion that the net costs were considerably more palatable and that this existing bonding would be sufficient to cover those costs.
So this is another 2 items being completed in this
Yes.
in this budget year that, you know, just more of a fulfillment of the budget requests that were asked at the beginning of the budget cycle.
That is correct.
So
Yes.
Mayor, I have a question.
Is that Mr. Bushka? Yes.
Yes, it's saying repurposing from the window replacement project at the middle school.
Yes.
What's happening to the window replacement project at the middle school? It's not being done, or money's been left over from that, or?
So what they, with the American Rescue Plan funding, one of the priorities of that funding is to improve ventilation. And those windows, that window project qualifies under American Rescue Plan funding. The schools received $5.9 million in ARPA ESSER funding. So they are putting that window project under their ARPA funding. And as I understand it, the cost escalation from 2018, when they gave us a cost estimate, to the present time, that project is actually now going to cost them about $1.2 million. I'm not sure if that would also qualify for school construction reimbursement. So I'm hoping it comes in lower than that and they can redirect some of those funds back into the classroom.
Do we know when that money's coming forward?
So the school has already received their $5.9 million in ARPA funding. The city received $5,037,000 and change in the end of June. So we have our first tranche of money also. Other questions on this or with regard to putting this question before the voters? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, I'll entertain a motion to authorize the purchase of a municipal tractor plus 5 attachments for the Parks Department for $202,864 from CN Wood Enviro LLC of North Haven, Connecticut, to be paid from vehicle replacement account.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I heard Mr. Bushka and I heard Mr. Wright. Are there questions? Because Emil is here.
Yes, I do have questions.
Yes.
Actually, it's the same question for items 3 and 4. What was the reason for waiving the bidding process?
The reason for waiving the bidding process was because the unit would be available for the winter season. This will be a unit that is going to be built out in September with an October delivery from CN Wood.
Neil, do you want to talk a little bit about why this unit is needed for the winter? What the challenges we faced last year?
Well,
What
the
this is-
challenges we faced last year was we had the comparable unit to this, which was called a holder, unit number 1530 on the vehicle replacement program. The problem we were having was that it seemed to always been an unreliable piece of equipment, even though the unit we had before that was very reliable. That's why we went with another one when we purchased this unit. We have expended at least $3,000 to $4,000 a month maintaining this unit during the winter. And when it did break down, we had to use other means of personnel to clean the sidewalks. So that's the reason why we're getting this unit.
So this is a replacement for the unit you already have?
That's correct.
Is the old unit being traded in or sold off or?
We're gonna sell that off on public surplus to offset the cost of this particular unit.
What is the PRAB fund balance?
Vehicle replacement account balance.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I missed the VRAB meeting because I was away, but how does that line up with our replacement schedule? Was this something that had to be pushed up, or when was the schedule to be replaced?
This unit is a 2010 unit. We moved it up 10 years. At the current unit, at the current cost that we're doing right now, at about $5,000 a month, it would have cost us about $50,000 to maintain each unit, and the parts are coming out of Canada, which is very difficult to maintain at this particular point in time.
Okay.
So the cost benefit analysis said we're throwing good money after bad by holding on to this unpredictable piece of equipment. Last December's storm, where we had 18 inches of snow in like a 24-hour period of time, it was not functioning. And when it happens, instead of 1 or 2 employees deployed to clear an area of sidewalk, we ended up having to send 4 employees. So not only is it costly to maintain that piece of equipment, but when it isn't working, it's costly in the form of manpower to clear the sidewalks and parks and.
Extra overtime. Yeah.
So is
Right.
it that little orange holder machine? Is that the one we're talking
It's the
about?
holder machine,
Yeah,
correct?
that's the one we're talking about.
Yeah.
I remember last year you had spoke about replacing that because it wasn't a reliable machine for
That
us.
is correct.
So that's the same machine then?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Is it being replaced by a better machine?
Yes, it is. I don't know, I do not know if you have all the paperwork, but there are at least 10 municipalities in the state of Connecticut that are currently using this machine. And it seems to be the state of the art use machine, especially in Hartford.
Other questions?
what are some big, I know we have a fire truck coming up for 800,000, 900,000. So if we purchase that next year, then we're running that down close to 100,000, right?
Well, I believe we, for this fiscal year, I believe we put the fire truck, the pumper, we put it off.
Right. Well, we have another one for next fiscal year, right?
We put that one off,
Okay.
yes.
So actually, what one of the things we realized as we were going through the last vehicle replacement advisory board meeting, we have not approved an updated plan. We're still working on the 2020 fiscal year vehicle replacement plan. Emil is working on an updated plan, which we can bring forward to the board later on this year. But one of the recommendations in vehicle replacement was if we put that purchase, the fire vehicle that you're talking about, or fire apparatus, out a year or 2, if it can be, it'll give us time to rebuild that fund balance and still be able to accomplish the purchases that we need to.
Right, because I think we can all see the importance of a fire apparatus versus a tractor. So I just want to be sure that we're not going to stray too far off that vehicle replacement line that we've kept on now and run that down.
Well, in answer to that, I did talk to Chief Trip, Assistant
Former
Chief
Chief
Trip.
Tally, Chief Trip.
Yeah, okay. And he was on board with that,
Okay,
pushing that off. He has said he had no problem with that at all.
okay,
And so pumper, and he said he can he can live with that.
Okay, yeah, as long, I mean, if that's the recommendation, was this recommended out of vehicle replacement?
It was, yes, yes. I would also add that I think that it's important when we look at that updated revised plan, that we recommit to the funding levels that we really need to be at. I know that we've strayed a little bit from that in our attempts to maintain a tax rate that's palatable to our taxpayers and still be able to move operating budgets for both the Board of Ed and the city forward. But I think what we're going to find now is we do have to recommit to fully funding those annual sinking amounts. Any other questions on the municipal tractor with 5 attachments?
Yeah, I just have a question, Emil. There's an email stating the current it's on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts state bid.
That is correct.
What, could you explain that? I'm a little unclear about that.
Well, what it is, the state of Connecticut currently does not have a what you would call a state bid, does not have a contract. Sometimes we use the Massachusetts contract, just like we do for other pieces of equipment. But we have dealers in the state of Connecticut that uses Massachusetts state Connecticut contracts. They have authorized dealers.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions regarding this purchase? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item 5, I'll entertain a motion to authorize the purchase of a felling trailer for $32,344 from Tyler Equipment of Berlin, Connecticut, to be paid from the vehicle replacement account.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Wright, seconded by Mr. Bayes. Questions?
Yes, can you describe briefly what this is?
Do you want to talk a little bit about what this trailer is and why we need it?
Okay, this trailer here was slated for the 2021 refurbishing for $25,000. My department went to do the job for a refurbishing. Once we moved the decking, we realized that it was too far gone for that refurbishing project. So I condemned the unit, had it scrapped, and then we went out to purchase a new one. The new one we found was about $32,000. This unit is basically used to move what we have is called a Volvo 160 excavator, which is the biggest piece of equipment that the city owns. This excavator basically is not made to go from job site to job site being driven. It needs to be trailered because if we blow an axle on this thing, one of the gear planetaries, it's going to cost us about $20,000 to $25,000 to repair. So we need the trailer to move this piece of equipment from site to site.
Other questions regarding the trailer?
Again, the old trailer will be put out to bid or auction.
Excuse me?
The old trailer is going to be put out to bid.
What we did was we went out to all the filling dealers, and right now, no one has anything in stock. The latest person that I talked to had told me that we had a lead time of 50 weeks. And that's just the way, we had another dealer who had one, the same exact trailer, but we missed it by maybe 2 days, but they sold it for $42,000.
Well, the cost of refurbishment at $25,000 versus buying this, it's worth to do this anyway. There's refurbishing old
Well,
ones.
see, refurbishing at this particular point in time would have been scaling the whole piece of equipment. We putting down new decking and everything else. This trailer, you had to understand that we were going to refurbish was typically handmade for this particular unit. And it's a very unique piece of equipment that you cannot find.
So this new trailer will be more versatile. You can put all different sorts of equipment on it.
That is correct. And just to let you know, the state police also helped us weigh this piece of equipment to make sure that it was in DOT regulation.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, that motion carries. Before I go into discussion or business by department heads, Alice, last night at the council meeting, the Board of Councilmen did approve the establishment of a line item within our budget to track the $569,281 of our ARPA funding for the Board of Education to access. Do I need Board of Finance to approve that as well, or is it just the council that does that? All right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the council to add an agenda item. That agenda item is would include a motion to approve the establishment of a line item for purposes of the Board of Education reporting and recording their expenses against the $569,281 appropriation from the municipal ARPA funds. And as I said, so at this point, just a motion to add it to the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
Okay, you heard 2 seconds, Mr. Wright. And no questions on this one. I'll just call it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now I need the motion to approve the establishment of the line item to track Board of Education expenses against the $569,281 appropriation of municipal ARPA funds.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Boynton. All right, any questions on this one?
I think probably just a general one that we all have. So this is just creating that line item so that way if they make requests to utilize that money, it's in a separate line item and it can be tracked through there.
Yes. So Alice had suggested when we met to discuss what was the easiest way to handle those expenses. They're outside of the operating budget. And the recommendation was that we treat it like the CRF funding that we receive from the state, which is the process that we've established with the Board of Education to track their COVID-related expenses. Communicated this to the superintendent and the board chair. They responded that that worked for them. And I also asked them to give us a general idea of what expenses were going to be charged against that. She did provide me with a list of the expenses which we thought would qualify. They were the EL teaching staff and social workers. Those expenses both fall not only within guidance or funding objectives for the census tracts, but also under mental health and other disparities. So I feel quite confident that we're in a good place and that the Board of Education has now been able to access all of the funding they had requested under their operating budget.
So this is they spend it, we reimburse, or it's they come through us for funding?
Yes, Alice will address that.
The way we had actually established even the CRF funds is to give them access to that fund, to those line items. They can input their own expenses. They will manage it off-site, but it'll be in our fund. So they'll have total control of that line item.
We will also be able to, and this was the other piece, I apologize for not adding this. When communicating with the superintendent, we also suggested that there be quarterly updates and reviews. So much of the way you see the budget performance reports on their operating budget in the general fund, this will be reported to the Board of Finance. And I think a quarterly, because most of the expenses that they anticipated charging against this line item were salaries.
Yeah, I think my only concern would be making sure that they're not using those funds for things that aren't, that end up not qualifying for ARPA and being in a situation where, that money has to be back or whatever the case may be. I think that'd be my only concern, but if we're reviewing that quarterly, if something goes in there and says, oh, that's actually not eligible for ARPA, but they already spent the money, I guess that would be my only concern. But if we're gonna keep an eye on that, then that would be fine.
Yes, I think there's accountability by bringing reports back to the board quarterly. We could certainly do it more frequently, but based on the information that was shared with me, as I said, it was all salaries and directly related to those programs that they presented in their operating budget. The ELL students, that obviously that was a vulnerable population. I think that did probably struggle a little more than your traditional students. And then, of course, with the mental health being a hyper focus of the ARPA funding, social workers and any of that outreach. So based on what was presented to me, I do think that the Board of Education has done a great job earmarking or identifying those expenses. And I can certainly share that communication with you. I'll forward her email just so you can see that.
So long as they stick to those items, then we'll be in good shape.
I agree. I think that the Board of Education, recognizing that their reporting mechanisms for their own ARPA funding is, I think, even a little more stringent than our reporting requirements. I think they'll be pretty vigilant in dotting i's and crossing t's. All right, so the motion has been moved by Mr. Bayes, seconded by Mr. Boynton. If there are no other questions, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now I can go into item 6 and entertain a motion to consider business by department heads.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Bushka, seconded by Mr. Bayes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have Dan Farley in the room. Did you want to add anything this evening? All right. Alice, anything we're missing? Emil, anything else for this evening? And Mr. Draper, anything you want to add?
So I'm just going to reiterate something that Carol mentioned at the city council meeting last night. This year for absentee ballots, or for the primary and for in November, we aren't going to be, the applications for absentee ballots are not going to be mailed out to every eligible voter, unlike they were this past election. However, anyone can submit an application. They just need to get that from our office. So Carol had asked the council members, and I'm sure if she were here right now, she would ask you the same, to just let that be known to the public. Anyone you encounter, just let them know, spread the word that if they want to vote by absentee for the upcoming election, that they need to request the application from the city clerk's office.
Now, John, I read somewhere they can request them through the state too, or they have to go directly to.
Correct. I mean, it's available on the state's website as well.
Okay.
And so they don't need to come to the city clerk's office, but if they want us to mail one to them, we can do that.
Does the state just send all those requests to you guys anyway? That they get?
So they can download the application from the state's website.
Okay,
They would send it to the city clerk's
but
office.
anybody locally that want to get it, they can come to you.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. All right, we'll move into item number 7. I'll entertain a motion to consider business by the mayor and members of the Board of Finance.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bayes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we'll go to the screen first. Is there anything this evening, Mr. Bushka?
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Anderson?
Maybe not directly related, but a little birdie told me that down in the clerk's office, both Ingrid and John here finished up their municipal clerk certification. So congrats to you guys. Keep it going. Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Mr. Boyan?
The only thing I would, the new brewery down on Water Street, if you haven't been, definitely worth the trip. It's absolutely beautiful inside, and the beverages were tasty as well. So if you haven't had a chance, please stop by.
Not that I'm following you, but I drove by and I happened to see you walking in. So, and I agree. I mean, it's a great asset in the city. I'm glad that you were able to get in and enjoy it. All right, Mr. Boyce.
Not much. When I walked in the room, Mr. Wright and myself were talking about how much good stuff is going on right now in town. So, keep your eyes to the newspapers and Facebook and things. And there's a lot of really good events going on around town through the end of the summer. So really happy to see all that's going on. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Wright?
Not tonight, thank you.
All right. And I think the only thing that I would add is, as you know, and I'm sure if Lorene was here, she would once again say, what are we doing to grow our grand list? What do we know? Our budgets are tight. We're always struggling to approve requests that are presented to us, make sure we're fully funding our vehicle replacement account, making sure that our pensions are fully funded. So grand list growth, as you know, has been a hyper focus of mine as well. I did have an opportunity to bring a potential developer to the city council a couple of weeks ago. Waters Way is the name of the organization. They currently own the Hotchkiss Brothers building, which all of you who drive by that know it's blighted and in some segments of the building condemnable. I'm delighted that they have spent so much time doing their due diligence about bringing this project to the city of Torrington. It stands strong potential to be a $42 million development. Translates into about $1.3 million in taxes at our current mill rate. Obviously, it's tricky to get a developer like that to the table. There are usually incentives that need to be offered. So over the next 2 years, we will be continuing to work with this developer to see if we can bring that to fruition. But I would say that those are the kinds of things that are happening, and they directly relate to the work that the city council and the Board of Finance and the Board of Safety have been doing for the last 4 years, focusing on what makes quality of life in Torrington more attractive for these developers. What are we doing to invest in ourselves so that outsiders can look at that and say, there's a community that's worth investing in. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to this board for recognizing that that's as important as my beating the bushes to find those developers. So with that, if there is no further business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Yeah.
And I heard Mr. Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Night all.
Right.